This past Friday, Noah, our little one, shared with us that an older kid from his bus asked him to say some words about body parts, right? And I shared with most of you the whole bus experience in the earlier part of September, and now it's November, and it's still going on. And since then, a lot changed, and we know the school is doing their very best to monitor these things, but I think I'm admitting that the school cannot monitor every conversation between every child. That's just impossible. So Hyun asked Noah, "What did you do about it? What did you do about it?" And Noah said, "I didn't say the word because I didn't feel it was the right thing to do." While admitting the sad truth that we cannot monitor all the information that enters our child's world at certain ages, I was very thankful to hear this because that's what it all comes down to. Not just for a first grader, but for all of us. It all comes down to being spiritually grounded and rooted in Christ. Today's reading from the Gospel of Luke is about the destruction of the temple and signs of the end times. It's interesting that this passage follows right after Jesus seeing a poor widow. So in verse 1, we started from verse 5, but from verse 1 to 4, it's about Jesus seeing a poor widow put in two very small copper coins into the temple offering. And it says, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all the others." And then, the very next scene is where the disciple is fascinated by the beauty of beautiful stones in the temple, right? And to this, Jesus predicts the future, a future that is more disturbing than promising. But for its first readers in Luke, perhaps a future that is already in the past, right? So this destruction of temple and the end of Jesus, they already experienced that. For Luke's readers, these imagery were a prophecy that has already fulfilled, and Luke still processing losing their religious leader, their spiritual leader in Jesus. Luke was trying to give his people an assurance that this isn't the end, that there is something bigger after this, that God's will is something larger and bigger than ours. And the phrase that caught my attention the most from our reading today was verse 14, which says, "But make up your mind." But make up your mind. Not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourself. Make up your mind. Making up our mind is not as easy as we want it to be, right? Sometimes we are in a position where we have our backs against the wall, where we are pressured to make our minds up because of our various responsibilities in our lives. But in general, making up our mind isn't easy because it's not a question of how much you know, how much knowledge you have, because it's not an issue of how much you experienced in your life. And most importantly, it's not talking about simply making a choice out of different options. So making up our mind is not easy. Rather, it is a question of where are you right now? Make up your mind not to worry is asking, where are you right now? It's a question about your spirituality. Where are you right now? I also shared some part of this in my pastor's report at the church conference. But for the past few weeks, I have been very tuned in with God. sometimes even as a pastor in a pastoral role, when you get caught up in many different tasks in life, I find myself drifting away from God, that spiritual relationship with God. But these past few weeks, I can assure you that it was opposite from that. I was very tuned in with God, processing the God's will through the disappointments in life, processing the love and support around me, processing how blessed I am to be part of this church like Trinity. But not only when it's good and close-knitted, but I was also tuned into the parts of my life when I was spiritually drifting away from. And that one of the example of that is with my family. Nothing dramatic, nothing serious, nothing bad, but clearly, to me, I could feel that the emotional process during the past few weeks in a professional life, I was unintentionally bleeding into my spirituality through my family. To give you a better understanding, I got these words from Rebecca Simon Peter. She says, spirituality is not only an expression of encounters one might have with God, but the qualities needed to cultivate such encounters. Some that comes to mind are honesty, open-mindedness, curiosity, transparency, vulnerability, risk-taking, the willingness to not know or not have all the answers, the willingness to be imperfect, the willingness to be present to what is, the willingness to let go of control, also humility, courage, surrender, even desperation. So if I ask myself in those terms, if I was able to be vulnerable, imperfect, present to what is, surrender with my family, to my family, I don't think I was. Not that I felt like I was more reserved, but I wasn't allowing myself to ask why I was reserved. Not that there wasn't much in-depth conversations as much we should have, but the fact that I wasn't even aware of it until so much later. I guess the reason I'm sharing this experience with you today is to explain the difference between being spiritually grounded and acquiring knowledge about marriage from a Relationship 101 book. Spiritually grounded is a different thing. Being spiritually grounded is to be in constant conversation within yourself. Asking ourselves, where are you right now? Where am I right now? So I began a spiritual discipline, a practice this past week, a very specific one that is. At the end of each day, I began to briefly journal. I'm not a natural journal person, so it is a discipline. I have to commit myself to doing it. Because I believe that recording our insights helps our processing. So some days it was a paragraph, and some days it was a word. The specific question I would ask myself is, at this time of my life, is, how did I experience God through my family today? That's a question, the only question that I'm asking myself. How did I experience God through my family today? The important thing to remember is that it's not always going to be good. Whatever you're thinking about, it's not always going to be good. And I'm writing about the not so good stuff too. Why I wasn't experiencing God through my family that day. Think about that. But I know that this intentionality over time, when it adds up, will restore my spiritual health with my family. I know that. So my question to you is, what is your question? You might be like me, asking, how did I experience God through my family, my spouse, or with my children? You might be asking that question. Or you might be asking, how did I experience God at work today? Or how did I experience God in the backyard today? Or how did I experience God through my body, if you're dealing with health problems? Or if you're very spiritually mature, you might go and ask yourself, how did I experience God through all the news that I'm hearing today? Yeah, I think you can go to that extent. I encourage you to be specific with your question, whatever that question is. And get a journal, a notebook, a smartphone, and take a few minutes each day to ask yourself, where am I right now? Where are you right now? It won't happen overnight. I know my family won't be perfect and all the problems will be solved after a few journaling sessions. It doesn't work like that. But at least I know I'm taking the time to ask the question to be spiritually grounded. In today's scripture's term, to make up my mind, not to worry. To make up my mind, not to worry. And that's what that passage meant to me. If you recall back to our reading today, there's a progression in how Jesus talks about the end time. He begins with nations and kingdoms going against each other. And then there will be earthquakes. And then there will be famines. And then that you will be in prisons. And then that you will be betrayed even by your loved ones, your family. And then this progression comes all the way down to a hair on your head. It's a progression. If we reverse this, it all comes down to you. The whole idea of God's reign, God's kingdom, the whole prediction of what's going to happen next, it all comes down to no one else but you. So let us build the habit of asking that question, where am I right now? And then let us hear Jesus' answer, who is answering us. Stand firm right there, wherever you are right now. Stand firm right there, and you will win life. Amen.